Today we're going to continue solving quadratics by taking square roots. So keep in mind for your steps, you want to make sure that you isolate your variable to one side of the equal sign. And then whenever you square root, don't forget to write that plus or minus. And then you need to double check and make sure that you simplified your square root if possible. All right, so if I look at the first example, I want to get my x squareds on one side and I want to get my whole numbers on the other side. So it doesn't matter which side you move the x squareds to, but I'm just going to go ahead and say, you know what, let's move this x squared to the left. And so if I move the x squareds to the left, then that means I want to move the whole numbers to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and just do two steps at once here. All right, so then I've got 6x squared minus 5x squared, which just leaves me with an x squared. Then I've got my equal sign. 50 minus 10 is 40. All right, so now to get rid of a square, we're going to square root both sides. Don't forget to write your plus or minus. Okay. A square and a square root are inverses, so the square root and the square will cancel. So I get x equals plus or minus, and then I need to ask myself, can a square root 40 simplify? All right, so two numbers that multiply to be 40, such as 4 and 10. 4 breaks down to 2 times 2. 10 breaks down to 2 times 5. And I'm looking for pairs of numbers, so I have a pair of 2's. So I get to bring a 2 outside. Now the 2 and this 5 don't have a pair, so I need to multiply them back together. And I'm going to get a 10. So our answer is that the x's can be equal to plus or minus a 2 root 10. Let's look at the next example. You may not distribute that through because they are squaring that binomial. So do not distribute that through. But I do want to get this by itself, but they're multiplying it by -2, and then all of that is being added by a 3. So my first step is I'm going to move the 3 over. That's going to give me a -2 times the binomial x minus 7 squared equals 12. All right. So since I said I don't want to multiply that through, we're going to divide it. All right, so the -2's cancel. So then I have left that x minus 7 squared equals -6. The inverse of squaring something is square rooting, so I'm going to square root both sides. All right. However, you cannot square root a negative, so this is no solution. You can't square root a negative number. And I'll show you, if you grab a calculator and you try to type in the square root of a -6, it's going to say that there is not a real answer. Okay? So you cannot square root negative numbers. All right, next example. My goal is to get the x by itself, but it's a fourth of an x, and then they're adding 6. So we're going to subtract 6 over first. That gives me 1/4 x squared equals 12. Now, if I have a calculator, I can divide both sides by a fourth. If I don't have a calculator, I can multiply both sides by 4. Okay, so those are going to cancel. So I get x squared equals, that'll be 48. And to get rid of my square, I'm going to square root both sides, and I'm going to remember to put my plus or minus. The square root and the square cancel. So I have x equals plus or minus, but I need to ask myself, can a square root 48 simplify? Okay, Okay, so I can say 2 times 24, I can say 2 times 12, 6 times 2, and 3 times 2. And again, I'm looking for pairs, so I have a pair of 2's, so I'm going to bring that out. I have another pair of 2's, so remember that you're going to multiply that if you have more than one. And then I have the 3 left over. And then we're just going to simplify that, so we get plus or minus, that multiplies to 4, and then the root 3. All right, next example. So again, we're going to isolate our variable, so we're going to subtract 8 over. And I have negative 2/3 x squared, that canceled, equals 12. And again, if I have a calculator, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2/3. Okay, so I get x squared equals, and let's say you don't have a calculator, then take 12 divided by negative 2, which is negative 6, and take it times 3, and that's negative 18. All right. So then I'm going to get rid of my square by square rooting. Okay. However, this is again a no solution. Can't square root negatives. All right, let's look at the next one. I'm going to add my 25 over. So that gives me 16x squared equals 25. I'm going to divide both sides by 16. Oh, the 16s are gone, so I have x squared equals 25/16. Then I'm going to square root. And I'm going to go ahead and just square root everything. Oh, I forgot my plus or minus. So I get x equals plus or minus, the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 16 is 4. So my answer is plus or minus 5/4. Okay, let's look at the last example. Subtract 13. We get negative 9x squared equals negative 13. Divide both sides by negative 9. So we get x squared equals 13/9. Then we're going to square root both sides. Don't forget our plus or minus. However, on this one, square root 13 does not simplify, but the 9 does. So I get plus or minus root 13 over a 3.